Very, very good morning to our audience. I'm Zara Kassem, the CEO of Corporate Secretaries International Association Limited, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to our event for today. I see that we have participants from all over the world, from London, Australia, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Nigeria, South Africa. So a very, very warm welcome to all of you. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. I want to also extend a very special welcome to our facilitator for today's masterclass, Dr. Sabine Demkovsky, and also our host for today, the Institute of Chartered Secretaries of Bangladesh, all of our CSIA members, and our partners who's joining us for our masterclass today. Just to tell you a little bit about CSIA, we are an international federation of 12 member countries, and we represent around 90,000 corporate secretaries and governance professionals across 4 continents. As the global voice of corporate secretaries and governance professionals, we connect corporate secretaries, governance professionals, governments, and members of the governance community. And platforms such as these, we then use to share knowledge and to share the experiences and insights from our members. For today's event, we are very excited to again be collaborating with Better Boards and the Institute for Chartered Secretaries of Bangladesh to bring you the second in the series of masterclass, creating value from board evaluations. So we're very excited to welcome back Dr. Sabine Demkovsky, and she's going to be sharing her insights and her experiences and practical tips on how to ensure that boards can enhance their performance through board evaluations. Before I hand over to Dr. Demkovsky, I would like to welcome Mr. Mohammed Asad Ullah. He's the president of the Institute for Chartered Secretaries of Bangladesh, and he's also a CSIA ExCo member, and he will be sharing some opening remarks with us. Mohammed is a fellow member and the president of ICSB for the term 2022 to 2025. He has been serving as Executive Director Corporate Affairs and Group Company Secretary of all companies of Beximco Group since 1998. He's also an active member of a number of renowned professional and social organizations of the country. Welcome, Mohammed.
Good afternoon. Respected speaker of this session, Dr. Sabine, Jara Kazin, CEO of CSIA, members of ICSB, the participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The webinar organized by CSIA and hosted by ICSB on the topic creating value from board evaluations. Thank you, Jara Kazin, for organizing this webinar. First of all, I hereby giving a short brief about the Institute of Chartered Secretaries of Bangladesh, established under the Chartered Secretaries Act 2010, an Act of Parliament. ICSB is the successor of ICSMB, that is Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Managers of Bangladesh, established in 1997 under the Companies Act of Bangladesh. We have 2.5 years course with 1800 marks and followed the international standards curriculum with about 5,000 students in different academic levels. There are about 600 companies are listed in the stock exchange of Bangladesh. We have so far produced 700 members in our institute who are serving as company secretary in different national, multinational group of companies, banks, insurance companies, etc. The members of our institute, being the company secretaries of those listed companies, have been playing a pivotal role between the board and the management. They are also working as regulatory compliance officer and chief governance officer and acting as bridge between board and the management and also shareholders of the company. The Securities and Exchange Commission of Bangladesh has issued Corporate Governance Code in 2018, where laid down the mandatory provisions for appointment of board members, independent directors, CFO, and company secretary, and their functions as well. ICSB has been working to promote governing excellence in the listed companies of Bangladesh, and with the end in view, ICSB introduced the Corporate Governance Excellence Award in 2014 to the best performing companies, corporate governance companies, and till today, it continues. After introduction of this Corporate Governance Excellence Award, huge competitions have been created amongst the listed companies to get the prestigious Corporate Governance Award, and corporate governance have been developed to a great extent in the listed companies of Bangladesh. My personal experience as company secretary of Beximo Group, a largest business conglomerate of Bangladesh, I would like to mention here that importance of board evaluation. Board evaluation are crucial for the effective functioning of an organization. The purpose of board performance evaluation is to assess the effectiveness of the board in fulfilling its duties, identifying areas for improvement, and enhancing the governance process. It promotes accountability, identifies strength and weakness, and drive continuous improvement to ensure the board's optimal performance in guiding and overseeing the organization. Here are the significant importance. Enhancing board effectiveness. Regular board evaluation provides an opportunity to assess the performance of individual directors as well as the board as a whole. Identifying and mitigating risks. By assessing the board's composition, process, and decision-making practices, potential risks can be identified and appropriate measures can be implemented. Fostering continuous learning. Board evaluation provides an opportunity for board members to identify their strength and weakness and focus on personal and professional development. Enhancing stakeholders' confidence. Periodic board evaluations serve as a demonstration of the organization's commitment to corporate governance guidelines. Here are some commonly used methods for creating value for board evaluation. Board self-evaluation. Board self-evaluation surveys are procedures designed to gather feedback from individual board members about their own performance and the functioning of the entire board. Excellent board evaluation. External board evaluation involves hiring independent directors and consultants to conduct an in-depth assessment of the board's performance. Key performance indicators. KPIs are specific metrics used to assess the board's performance against predetermined objectives. By setting clear KPIs and regularly tracking process, the board can evaluate its effectiveness based on tangible outcomes. Board observations. Board observations involves an external observer attending board meeting and closely monitoring the board dynamics, discussions, decision-making process, and adherence to governance principles. This approach enables board members to assess each other's strength, weakness, and level of understanding regarding the board's role in company. This process promotes open communication, mutual learning, and accountability among board members. They are used a combination of methods such as interviews, surveys, and document reviews. Here are most important takeaway for enhancing board effectiveness. Regular board evaluation are important for enhancing board effectiveness, identifying and mitigating risks, fostering continuous learning, and enhancing stakeholder confidence. Tools and methods for measuring board effectiveness, including board annual self-evaluation, external evaluation, KPIs, board observation, and peer reviews. Best practices for effective measurement include clearly identifying objectives and metrics, ensuring independence and objectivity, encouraging open communication, and using digital tools for efficacy and accuracy. The effectively measures board effectiveness and streamline the evaluation process. Consider labeling a board portal. This is secure and user-friendly platform for you can share board materials, conduct meetings, and collaborate for any board-related questions, including evaluations. However, our facilitator and speaker of the session, Dr. Sabine, will give us her thoughtful deliberations on the topics, and I hope the participants will be benefited and be able to apply in their respective job places for better board management. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for sharing those opening remarks with us. It is now my pleasure to invite Sabine to delve a little bit deeper into some of the issues that we started to explore in our first masterclass, which was held in March. We will start with a presentation from Sabine, and that will be followed by an open forum. We will then take questions from the audience. So please do post your questions on the Q&A tab at any time during the webinar. We certainly will welcome your inputs, and of course that makes for a much more interactive session if we can respond to your questions. We will then close with or wrap up the session with some closing remarks. So I would like to now invite Sabine to join us and share her insights with us. Sabine is a trusted board advisor who has worked with and alongside companies listed on the FTSE and DAX, global organizations, and leading private equity and professional service firms. Her research into board effectiveness, has been peer-reviewed and published internationally. With a PhD in business management, Dr. Sabine has established 2 successful businesses, the Coaching Center and Better Boards. Alongside her academic qualifications and business acumen, Sabine is also a trained executive coach and certified to perform a wide range of psychometric tests. In her own words, she's driven by a passion to get down to the nuts and bolts and create real, long-lasting change in organizations. Welcome, Sabine.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to the President for the opportunity to present to this global audience. As Sarah said, we worked alongside very large, well-known organizations that are listed on various stock exchanges. We worked with Daimler, Mercedes-Benz. We worked with well-known financial services organizations. And this is really an essence of our experience. So let's get started. What we are seeing is, I'm trying to move forward. Yeah, what we are seeing is that there is a growing interest, as this webinar shows, and the number of registrations for this webinar. There's a growing interest around the globe to increase board effectiveness. Why is this? For a start, there are the corporate governance codes. I will dive into this a little bit deeper. There is also a recognition that not everything goes according to plan in the boardrooms around the globe. Every country has its fair share of failures. ESG as an acronym is used all over the world. G is, of course, governance. That has also helped to bring governance, which in the past was more in the background, bring it more to the fore. Thanks to social media and the media in general, there is a far greater demand for transparency and less acceptance for basically dealings behind closed doors. Large international investors are demanding to see that boards are doing these evaluations on a regular basis, and they would like to have some insights into how it is done. And we see more and more of our clients see we are registered, we are ISO certified, and we are also accredited by the Governance Institute in England and Ireland. And this is becoming much, much more important for investors than it used to be in the past. There is also a generational change in the boardrooms. You know, we see a change of the guard, so to speak. Younger people, the next generation is moving into the chair roles, into the director roles. They have been through another training. They find feedback much more acceptable than maybe an older generation. And let's face it, there's also an ambition of directors and the desire to be better, to become more effective. So lots of drivers are working together that there is a growing interest around the globe in increasing the effectiveness of boards. And just some examples here. There is a corporate governance code of Nigeria. Yeah, they are clearly stated that annual board meetings should be conducted. The same, of course, in Bangladesh. The same in the code in the UK. And I could go on and on and on. Most corporate governance codes in every country make a statement that they wish to see that it's desirable for to do a board effectiveness evaluation on an annual basis. And most state that they would like to see a fully facilitated external board evaluation every 3 years. So it all starts with understanding the existing state of the board's effectiveness, the measurement of where are we actually at the moment. But we think at the heart of it is, of course, to understand the levers, the drivers. What is it actually that makes boards effective? And there we have a huge gap in understanding. There is little academic research. Most board evaluations are done, if I may say so, in a very basic manner. Typically, they consist of some interviews and observations. These are very subjective and do not allow for any benchmarks and comparisons and are not based on data and hugely depend on the experience of the board evaluator. Everyone can put board evaluator on a business card. So what it is about is the measurement of what is it that makes the board effective, understanding the levers, take action, build, define then your approach based on this data for increasing effectiveness, implementing it into your practice and into the behaviors, reflect on what has worked and what has not worked, and measure again. So it is a continuous cycle that we are seeing, which is essential for a board to develop and to increase its effectiveness. So what will we be talking about? Actually, we will talk about what makes a board really effective to start with. What role can board evaluations play in the process? How are board evaluations evolving? And what do best-in-class boards do with the results of their board evaluations? So let's look into what makes a board really effective. And this is the research Sarah referred to that is peer-reviewed and published. So there are 7 levers a board can use to increase performance and effectiveness. And I will talk about each of them, plus leadership behaviors. So as you can see, it's really published all over. If it's published in Europe, it's published in the US, it's published in the UK, it's properly peer-reviewed. So please don't think I just made this up for this webinar series. So let's start. The first thing is that boards around the table, the directors around the table, need to understand each other. They need to understand the strengths they bring to the table. They need to understand the experiences they have, the expertise they have, the situations they have been through in their own careers. What we are seeing and what the reality is that there is insufficient time built into the schedules to get to know each other. Directors are recruited, they join the first board meeting, everyone rushing to get a train, a plane, whatever, after the board meeting, and off they go. Typically, this is not part of board evaluations, and we think it's a huge omission, and that is also what research shows. Second is the composition of the board. In the Western world, there is a lot of attention on gender, a lot of attention that played into this. There is too much focus on labels. Labels are almost secondary. We see in the Western world, there is a tiredness and exhaustion at the moment to talk actually about diversity and inclusion. There is a lack of understanding of the real issues. The real issues are know-how, behaviors, the mix of those know-hows and behaviors rather than labels. Clarification of roles and responsibilities. I'm sitting here in London. In London, if you had a certain career in the city and you are someone in the social circles, you need to have a board position. Yeah, it is essential for your understanding within your peer group. Now, it's difficult to switch from an executive to become a non-executive director. It requires different behaviors, different leadership, and that's not always easy, this switch. There is very often insufficient preparation for directors, insufficient training to make that switch. And very often, also the terms and conditions, what a director should do on the board are outdated. Vision, goals, and focus of the board. A common insight from board evaluations is that not enough time is spent to talk about the vision for an organization and the strategy. That's almost a sentence I can copy and paste into every report I submit. We don't do this, of course. But it is something that comes out very often. So not sufficient time is very often allowed in the agendas to talk about the vision, the strategy. It's the most common areas where there is dissent amongst directors. Structure and organization of the work of the board. This is the home turf of company secretaries, of course. Every board has issues. Every board can become better. And the most common issue here are, of course, the papers. Yeah, again, something that I could copy and paste. Papers do not meet the needs of directors. They lack in structure, they are too long, they don't show the directors what they should really focus on. What are actually the questions they should discuss in the board meetings? And then on the top of it, there are over-ambitious agendas, simply far too many items that very often don't allow for time to look at the big picture. Ability to resolve conflicts. Very often, board members shy away from asking tough and uncomfortable questions. It's easy to talk about it. Every panel I sit on, every panel at the events talks about the role of a director is to ask critical, uncomfortable questions. Reality is, if you sit on a prestigious board and you are part of a group and you know that the question might not be aligned with the interests of the chair, a lot of directors will not ask that question. So conflicts tend to linger around in boardrooms until they become big, big problems. There is a real lack of proactivity to solve small issues before they become big problems. Next one, regular reviews and reflection on how the board is working together. Again, in the interest of time, very often they don't happen. So these are the levers you can use on your board. And yet these levers are very often not part of board evaluations. So what role can board evaluations play in the process? I come back to this picture. It's about the measurement. It's about having the data. It's about the understanding of the levers. What we are seeing when we get the reports from our clients is it's hugely interesting for a consultant to finally meet some board members. There is so much you can talk about. And sadly, this is what's happening. So many questions are asked about interesting topics, but not about the real levers that help a board to become more effective. So if applied correctly, board evaluations are absolutely the right tool, and not only the right tool, the only tool we have to really help boards. And they are dedicated and driven to develop as a director, to really have good corporate governance. It's also there for investors to safeguard their assets and their investments and ensuring delivery of the strategy of the value creation plan and enhance performance and effectiveness. Excuse me. But in order for them to do this, you need to do the right board evaluation. And that is a problem. When you speak with directors around the globe, there are lots of complaints and great dissatisfaction about board evaluations. They are thought to be subjective, which is not surprising if they are just based on the interviews and observations. The reports vary greatly in quality. It really depends who has written the report for you. If a large organization is hired to do the board evaluation, do not think for a second that it's a partner who is actually writing the report. The partner is the face. The partner will interact with the directors, but the reports are written by some juniors. The complaint is also that reports, as I said, you can do copy and paste because some of the issues are very similar between boards, regardless of country, regardless of industry. And some directors believe they have spotted when a consultant did a copy and paste job. And of course, were furious about it after they saw the fees. There are very often no explanations why certain questions are asked. As I said, it's of course interesting to talk with the director of a large organization. But why are these questions asked? So there is also no real data to track progress systematically. So you see, there is a long list of dissatisfaction complaints with board evaluations. The devil is in the detail. So let's go into the issues, how they can be addressed. First, it starts with the attitude of the board evaluator. It is not about them and us. Yeah, it is not about, I spoke with a lot of colleagues, assessors, reviewers who say, we are assessing, we are reviewing. And I'm saying, no, directors don't want to be assessed. They are beyond this. Yeah, they had a successful career, otherwise they wouldn't sit on the board. These people resist. They don't want to be caught out by a consultant. It's important we position ourselves as partners, not as someone who is above a director. We are at equal level and we are providing you with insights, with data and insights that help you to become more effective. On the top, we are reasoning, we give a good argument why we are asking the questions we are asking. And we provide very attractive, easy to follow interfaces on the platform, which is also very, very critical. And that ensures us engagement in the process. if a board just does a board evaluation in order to tick the box, that is not good enough. That does not give you the right data. If they're engaged throughout the process and from the start, they are also willing to do something with the results. And that's the critical point. A board evaluation does not stop with the passing on of the report, but then really making sure that the action items are taken and implemented. And in order to enable ownership of the process, we can give company secretaries direct access onto the platform. They can use the platform, use it. Of course, you have to pay us a fee, but this direct access ensures ownership. You can use it for an internal evaluation. You can use it as part of an external evaluation. The next thing that is actually very critical is most board evaluations today provide one report to the board. This one report leads to that people sit around the table and go, what does it have to do with me? What am I supposed to do about it? It's very important, actually, according to our research, to provide directors with individualized reports to help them to understand what can they do to be more impactful in this specific boardroom, and what can they do as an individual to contribute to overall performance and effectiveness. The next one we see that's important is actually to have data that allows you to do to have benchmarks and comparisons on all dimensions of effective boards, and to do proper year-on-year comparisons so that the progress of your board can be tracked very systematically. So for each dimension of effective boards, we have benchmarks and comparisons, not only in general, but also by industry, by ownership structure, by size of company, so that organizations get insights into their peer group. And because directors are usually very data-driven, this data really speaks to them. Now, the problem with how board evaluations tended to be conducted, if you do interviews, it's hard to compare. Yeah, you can give a sense, oh, last year we saw this year we don't see that. But the hard data is missing. And that is what technology allows us now to bring to the table, the data. How are board evaluations evolving? It's more than a compliance-focused exercise. In the past, it was just, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done that? Now it's more a value creation strategic imperative. It goes from a consultant-led, time-consuming, expensive process to quite an agile, digitally enabled process. It costs less, it's quicker, it's easier. Company secretaries can actually do this without hiring a consultant by using the platform. It goes from looking backwards to provide data to go forward. The past we can't change. The future we can. It goes from this general report to individualized reports for every member of the board. It goes from this subjective opinion of an expert about a board to a comprehensive data-driven comparison. What do best-in-class boards do? And it's interesting. We see that good boards tend to become better. They wish to become better. Why? They don't shy away from doing a proper measurement. They understand the levers they can pull. They really work with the results. They build, they define their approach to effectiveness based on the results of the board evaluation. They embed them into their practices and behaviors. They reflect on a regular basis what has worked for us, what hasn't worked. they take the time after each board cycle to actually reflect. And once a year, they take the time out and take the results from the board evaluation and say, how do we work together? They spend a whole day on this. And these are the best boards we see. And then they measure again. So they're in this continuous loop. That was the presentation. We can now go on to your questions, and I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Sabine. You touched on many of the challenges that boards are facing. And I think it also highlighted how complex this whole board evaluation and assessing the performance of the board is for boards. It's very often a question of, we know that there are different approaches. Which one do we choose? You know, how is it implemented? And I think very often for especially our audience, who probably are mostly corporate secretaries, there is also the question of the role of the corporate secretary, you know, in this. You talked about engagement with the board, individualized reports, but you also said there's often resistance to this process because nobody likes to be assessed. So how do you actually ensure the engagement? How do you get the boards to understand the importance of regularly reviewing, because often they also don't have the time. How do you help the corporate secretary to actually achieve this? And is this part of their role?
It is part of their role. And what we are seeing that company secretaries become more and more active. They know of the resistance, they know of the complaints about board evaluations, and they are looking for new ways, for new approaches. And what we are seeing is company secretaries are very interested in our demos. Yeah, we can also do a demo of the platform. And they are actually presenting articles and insights. They discuss them with the chair. They don't present it to the boards. They initially discuss it behind closed doors with the chair and say, hey, there is a different approach. Yeah, there is something different we can do. Would you be interested? Here is a paper. Here is the latest research. And they even use it to position themselves, to bring something new and different to the table. So it is about having a good conversation with the chair to assess, is he open for this? Introduce it to them. Here is a different approach. Here is what it can do. Here is what we get out of it. Here are the benefits. Do we want to go down that route? Or do we want to stick to what we know?
Yeah, I think the corporate secretaries have their work cut out for them very often, depending on the boards that they are servicing. But we have a question from Philip Baldwin. Do you use your platform together with interviews, document review, observation, etc., to conduct a full review, or just the platform on its own?
No, that's exactly what we do. So when in this cycle, typically boards are in a 3-year cycle. When they are in the 3 years where they have to do a fully facilitated external board evaluation, we do also interviews, plus we observe the board. We write a separate interview report, and in addition, hand every director an individualized report based on the platform. And then what happens is that company secretaries take over in year number 2 and 3, where they use the platform independently and do not buy any additional consultancy services. And that way they still have this year-on-year comparison. They have all the data. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Sabrin, this is Nurul Alam, Senior Vice President of ICSB. I have a question. Before I go to my questions, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And this is very important topics for us who are actually practicing the company secretary. So board evaluation, actually how this process can be established in a company who basically take this responsibility for ensuring the board effectiveness, like whether the board size is fully compliant with the requirement of provisions of law, regulations of the main regulator, and whether the board is inclusive, diversified, and whether the board has a charter for effective operations, like every board meeting must include a agenda on compliance. Who should take this responsibility? Thank you.
It's yeah. Thank you for your question, and thank you for your kind words. It is definitely the company secretary who is in that role. In combination, they have to work very closely, and hopefully they have a good relationship with the chair. Because if that relationship is not working, it becomes hell for the company secretary and not very effective for the organization. So that combination between the two needs to work really well. But what we are seeing in most countries and also in the developing world is that the boxes are ticked. Let's face it. I mean, everyone who is joining us today has been through proper education. You know what your corporate governance code states. You have lawyers on your side to ensure that the terms and references are properly formulated. In 99.5% of the cases, this is not the issue. That usually, it is, it is assessed again and again, but frankly, they get a clean bill of health. It's always ticked. The issue is the effectiveness. Yeah. How is the board working together? Do these people that we put together in this room, yeah, that we selected, do they manage to add value? And that is very often, sadly, not really the case.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very real problem. Sabine, one of the questions also that came up was about exactly that, the attitude of board members to tick boxes. And very often, it's because you don't really want to be as transparent as you should be, because it's a reflection on the board. So that is an issue, I think, that maybe, I don't know if you have any remedies for that or suggestions around that, of how to convince boards that, obviously there will be issues, and if they don't address it and they're not transparent about it, they're not actually going to enhance their performance. But there's always an issue about how to convince them and how to get them to understand that issue. I don't know if there's anything that you have in your arsenal that can address that kind of issue.
I mean, we are heavily selling the benefits. So what are the benefits of doing a proper evaluation? Directors don't just want to work on one board. They want to have a portfolio of board positions. And they get very little feedback in every country. Yeah. So by selling them the benefit of you actually gain insights that help you to enhance your board career, that help you to become more impactful in this boardroom, but you also gain insights that you can use on other boards. We see very often the approach is used when there is a change of guards. So when a new chair is appointed, when a new CEO is appointed, when a number of new directors are appointed, to give them actually the data to define their legacy, so that from the start they pretty much know where we are at the moment, and here's what you can do to help to make it better, and then they can track the progress, and they have actually clear evidence about their contribution. And
Thanks,
that is very
Sabine.
often, let me add that, very often contrary to what some people think. A lot of boards say, oh, the board hasn't been together for such a long time. Should we wait another year until they have worked together for a while? We are seeing the best results actually if they jump in. You appointed a new chair, you appointed a new CEO, let's do the measurement and then let the board work together and track the progress, and you will see nicely, and that is also hugely motivating if they can see good progress.
And you can also see a fresh perspective very often if
Exactly.
someone new comes on board. Just linked to that, there's a question. In the case where there are changes in the board within the 3-year cycle, how do you ensure year-on-year comparison?
We basically simply include the new directors. So whoever is on the board completes the questions, and then we compare. It can also give you insights if that new composition is working, of course. Yeah. Very often we see when a couple of directors have been exchanged, rotated out, rotated in, that actually you can see that there is progress, and very often for the better.
And also, I think what's important on boards is how the interrelationship between board members, and that might also be highlighted in that instance. We have another question. How can boards, and this is from Musa in Nigeria, how can board of directors in an organization continue to embrace the use of new emerging technology tools like AI in a board meeting and for board evaluation purposes specifically?
To be honest, very simple. Yeah, it's about, are they open? Are they open to learning? Do they have a growth mindset? And that's really the interesting part for us. We see that the boards that are struggling, organizations that are struggling badly, and maybe even have the attention of the media, where it's obvious that they are struggling. Very often they do these box-ticking board evaluations because they don't want to be exposed. Actually, the boards that have this growth mindset, that want to learn, that are open-minded, they are more the ones who use these advanced technologies like our platform because they are open to learning and they become better and better. So the good ones we see becoming better, and the bad ones who are hiding actually slip down even further.
Another question we
Yes,
have. Oh, sorry. There's a question from the floor.
Okay. So may you ask a question?
Please, again.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So thank you, Dr. Sabin Damaskovi, for your details and elaborate presentation of board evaluation. I am listening the thing that sometimes you see that the company owners have the majority of share in a company. So they are always trying to influence the board members. Even independent directors, those who are working this company, they are also basically, they are not fully independent. And on the board evaluation, you mentioned about that independent report. It is very difficult for them to give a natural report. Even company secretary, you mentioned that is a very vital organ of influential people of the company. But he's also a very difficult position that give him totally neutral report. In this situation, I request you how to manage this thing to make the board more comfortable and accountable to the board and the members or shareholders. Thank you.
So what you can do now, also technology allows you to do that, of course. You can prepare a stakeholder report so that you actually get the view from the board and you contrast this with the view of the stakeholders. So very often when there is a majority shareholder in an organization, we put him in the category of shareholders. Yeah. He becomes part of the board, but also in the category of shareholders. And we give the board a report that contrasts the view of the board versus the view of the stakeholders. And that is often very revealing, because you are absolutely right. The views of large shareholders and investors can be quite different to that of the board. But it is important for the board to know where the differences are exactly, so that they can be addressed. And that is one of the things we are seeing very often. This is not addressed. Yeah, the conflicts linger around. Everyone knows that there are different views. They are put under the carpet as long as it's possible, until a real monster is in the room and you have a big fallout.
I think communication is absolutely key, and also just basically taking action
Yeah.
is one of those
Yeah.
issues as well. We have another question around, also from Philip. Large companies tend to conduct board evaluations, but the governance issues tend to come from the second and third tier listed companies, who are often family controlled and don't want to pay for a board evaluation as they don't see the value. How do you overcome this?
It's a good question. We see in the Western world more and more that it's pushed down. So they do everything that not only listed companies do board evaluations, rather it's pushed down to the medium-sized companies that are very often the backbone actually of the economies. Let's face it, it's not the few large companies, it's mostly the small and medium-sized companies. Again, I think technology can be a savior, because technology makes it much, much more affordable also for these smaller companies to actually do a board evaluation. So we basically have a tier structure of pricing. So for small and medium-sized companies, the usage costs less. And that very often helped to convince some of these organizations to, hey, let's give it a try. Why not?
Yeah, I think often with family-controlled organizations, they think they're already doing a good job, so they don't need a board evaluation. But it's important to convince them that if they have the right data, they can actually improve the performance of their boards. We also have a question on how do you assess the soft issues, which sometimes impact on the effectiveness of the board. And the board may be consisting mostly of technically savvy members. I'm assuming that means they focus more on the technical issues, governance issues, but they are often the very soft issues, and that might be come back to the relationships between board members. You know, how well do they
Exactly.
interact with
Yeah.
one another? So how do you then assess the soft issues?
So it has to do, there are various platforms out there, and it has to do with the functionalities of a platform. If you're talking now in terms of technology, that is what costs the money in software development. So allowing basically for qualitative questions and having the right questions, I mean, that is key. There are some standard instruments that don't allow that these soft issues can come out, but here all the relevant soft issues can come out. And that has mainly to do, you get this in three parts. We see this in our evaluations. A is in the strength section, B it's in the reflection section, and in the conflict section. So an instrument that just basically allows you to box tick is not sufficient. It's a waste of money. It needs to be a very flexible instrument with advanced functionalities that allows for qualitative questions and a proper analysis of qualitative question, not only a listing of the comments.
I think that's really important, Sabine. Just maybe a follow-up question to that. I think a lot of boards and organizations are also struggling with the issue of exactly that. What questions do we ask?
Yeah.
And you talked about, I think in your previous presentation, about the 7 hallmarks. Are there specific questions that boards can access that would actually address these soft issues?
Yeah, for every hallmark, we researched the questions, tested the questions. So for every hallmark, we have a set of questions. that point board members actually to the right levers. As I said, the problem with board evaluations is so many interesting questions can be asked. For example, we have seen board evaluation reports where the reviewer spends a lot of time talking about strategy. Now, I have been a strategy consultant. You know, a basic due diligence of a large organization takes a team of typically 5 people, 6 weeks. So for a board reviewer to come in to talk for an hour, have an interesting chat with a chair about strategy, does not point out the right issues and point to the right levers, doesn't give the insights you need in order to improve the effectiveness. But sadly, this is what's very often happening.
So there's actually a link question to that from Nurul about how companies can leverage board evaluations to enhance and drive governance and strategic initiatives. Is that what you're saying would happen with a board evaluation? That instead of just...
That is exactly this chart that I showed. Measure, understand the right levers, measure, think about the actions, implement them into your behavior, reflect on a regular basis, and go through these motions. And that's important. Sadly, we see far too often still a board evaluation is done. Thank goodness, poof, we've done it, another year of peace. No. Take the results, yeah, reflect on what are the actions we should take now. Make sure that you implement them into your behavior. Spend the time reflecting on a regular basis. Have we done this? Where have we improved? What has become better? What hasn't? And measure again after 1 year. That is what needs to happen in order to systematically develop the board.
So I guess a related question to that would be, you know, how often should board evaluations happen? I think in most organizations, it's annually. Is that often enough? If you talk about the reflection, does it take a year to reflect? There's so much that can change in a year.
No, the board evaluation should happen every year. Once a year, there should be this assessment. Every 3 years, there should be a more in-depth evaluation that includes interviews, observations. And in terms of reflection, we say, we see it. The good boards we are seeing, the companies that really thrive and make a difference, take the time after each board cycle and reflect what has worked, what could have been even better.
Okay, so that is important. We have a question from Diana. She says, Dr. Sabine, thank you for your great presentation. How does a consultant effectively communicate poor results arising from the board evaluation to the board? What is the best practice on this?
Don't shy away from saying what you found, but underpin it with real data, not just with your opinion. Because the opinion is dismissed. So is very often, if you point to a situation you have observed during a board meeting, that is very often dismissed because the boards have very often a reason. If you just have one data point from an observation, this is not sufficient. You need good data, and that is what technology can do to provide data to underpin basically findings. And that is what's very often missing in board evaluations, data.
I would assume there was another question linked to, you know, how to effectively create tangible value, but I think that is exactly what you're saying. The tangible value comes from reflecting on the data and actually implementing the changes that is required in order to make the board more effective.
Absolutely, Sarah, spot on. Yeah.
Okay, let me just see if there's any other questions. How essential part of the board evaluation are observations?
To be honest, I counsel caution. We counsel caution because we have seen far often, if you refer to a situation you have observed in a board meeting, board members find a cop-out, the data or the finding is not really sticking. That's what we are seeing. Yeah. Observations are done. It's a standard practice. Frankly, they are costly for organizations because it's a consultant day. Yeah. And consultants are very often using also that day to basically build relationships. So it's regarded as a win. However, if you then feed back to the board and say, during the board meeting, I observed X, Y, Z. Very often there is a cop-out saying, that was because, let's say, David was not in the room, or that was because we discussed this issue 3 times before, and so this is the reason why you saw a certain boredom and tiredness. So there is always a cop-out because the data from observations is not really sticking, which is why we very often say, if you want to save money, don't do an observation. The data you get from observation is not this great. But I know that with this opinion, it's quite controversial. Most board reviewers will argue that board observations are essential, and the current practice still is that boards would like to see an observation.
And I would assume that in conjunction with the data and all the other tools that are being used, it could probably serve a role if it
It
can be
serves a role
verified by the
in
data.
combination. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can underpin it again with data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have a few more questions coming in. Sabine. Let's see. How can a corporate secretary help the board to conduct a good board evaluation and develop a report in an organization? I'm assuming this would be without the use of a platform.
Without the use of a platform, I only saw complaints. Frankly, it's time consuming. Let's face it. If you do it without a platform, it's a time consuming process. And then it's difficult to put all the data together. Even if you put questions in a survey monkey, you just have you can just feedback. There's no comparisons. There are no insights for individuals. Forgive me. I, of course, am passionate about what we have created or the research. So I can only advocate this as a real solution, as a real support for company secretaries.
To provide that comprehensive report based on research data.
Use data. You use a platform wherever you can make your life easy. Otherwise, it is time consuming. You have to conduct interviews. You can use Excel sheets. You get the answers. You analyze the data. You feed back. You have to see yourself how insightful that is. Very often, it is not really insightful.
Absolutely. There is a question on the role of psychometric tests. Does that play a role in board evaluations?
Very often, particularly if you hire executive search consultants to do a board evaluation, they use psychometric tests. However, these are standard psychometric tests that were developed for a different purpose. They were not developed for the context of a board, which is why we think, oh, be careful. Yeah. Yes, they can produce interesting insights about leadership. Everyone likes to talk about high-level leadership. But how does this really help to increase effectiveness and performance? Again, very often it doesn't, because the instrument was developed for a different purpose. And the general discussion about leadership does not really help you to increase the effectiveness and performance of your board.
Then there is a question on, and I think you may have touched on this as well before, how can businesses maximize the impact of board evaluations to foster innovation, improve operational efficiency, and strengthen stakeholder trust. Obviously, board evaluations is not a public issue. So how does this help the organization to actually strengthen their stakeholder trust? I can understand where it can improve operational efficiency if the issues are addressed. How does it help with fostering innovations in strengthening stakeholder trust?
Only a strong board is willing and able to take risk and innovate. Yeah, a board and sign things off. Weaker boards play it far too cautious, protect their turf. So you need an open-minded board that is willing to learn, that is ambitious, that actually wants to progress and develop. That has ultimately a positive effect on the standing in the community and also on results.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that is what it is, the outputs and
That's the output.
the
Yeah.
outcomes that's going to show the public around that. I think we have a few more questions. We've got a few more minutes. We have another question from Philip. If you don't observe board committee, I think this one is related to your comment on observations. It would be like trying to assess the performance of a football team based on data from matches and training, talking to players and coaches and reading the coaching manuals. By seeing the team in action, you can tell whether or not they operate as a team. So I guess Philip is saying that, yeah.
As I said, it's a controversial position here. And yes, we also do board observations, yeah, because clients want to see them. What I'm saying is, if you only observe one board cycle, if you really want then to have the right data, you need access to at least 2 or 3 board cycles. And very often, what organizations want you to do is to just observe one board cycle, one board meeting. And when you present then back, you give feedback based on that one data point, there is very often a pushback for this finding. That's all what I'm saying.
We have a question that is from Sharia. Thank you for presenting such an effective presentation. In Bangladesh, the majority of corporations are family-owned. Basically, most of the organizations right now operate at a second-generation level. So in that instance, who would play a pivotal role in establishing corporate governance in our country, including the board evaluation? I think there is really a call for this board evaluation, but seems like there needs to be a little bit more than the companies themselves.
I mean, of course,
Then-
it can be pushed by the regulator more. We very often see that second, third generations, as I said, went through different training programs, are much more open to feedback and actually want to progress. So it's again the company secretaries who can open up the conversation and have a conversation with a major shareholder, with the owner, with the chair, and say, hey, there actually is something. Yeah, we heard something. Shouldn't we give it a try? And here are the benefits of it.
So I'm going to call out Mohammed and his team and say that the Institute has actually made great strides in Bangladesh to get the corporate secretary recognized in a legal capacity. So perhaps they can also have discussions with government and the regulators to try and make them understand that there is an important role for board evaluations in Bangladesh. So Mohammed, I'm calling you out on that. We'll keep an eye on what's happening at the Institute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jara Kazin, for your good moderation, and also Dr. Sabine for excellent presentation. I've learned a lot of things from your presentation, and it will be apply in my organization. One of my suggestion is that is there any standard guidelines of board evaluation? If not, I would suggest CSIA may make guidelines, detailed guidelines, and to circulate these to the members organization for effectively evaluate of the board. So if you take any steps to prepare the standard guidelines on it and to circulate to us, and it will be helpful for all of our companies, company secretaries to make the evaluation properly. And once again, I thanks Jara Kazin, and I think you may also conduct similar or any other topics such webinar. And our members of the Institute of Chartered of Bangladesh will be very helpful for this presentation in future. So thank you very much, Jara Kazin. And Dr. Sabi for
Thank you so much.
thoughtful.
Thanks, Mohammed. And yes, CSIA does work very closely with Dr. Sabine and Better Boards. And I think we would like to probably work together a lot more often. I would also announce that there will be more of these webinars that we will be doing in conjunction with Better Boards. Sabine is also available if you visit her website at www.betterboards.
Better-boards.com.
That's right. You will be able to also view Sabine has a website that has a lot of insights that shares the platform that can be used. I'm sure there's frequently asked questions, and Sabine is also available if you want to contact her on email if there are any specific questions. We would also invite you, if you have questions for the next webinar that you would like Sabine to address, that you send them to me at ceo@csiaorg.com. There will be a next webinar, so please do send your questions in. And Sabine and I will discuss how we can come up with some assistance for corporate secretaries in the form of, I think it could be a blog or maybe some kind of generic guidelines that we can look at developing. But I think we are out of time, and it's such an important topic, and we really would like to spend more time. But as I said, we will have future webinars where we can explore more of these very complex issues that seem to come up. There's always these different approaches, and then as we saw, different viewpoints that needs to be considered. When you're looking at measuring board performances and trying to improve board performances, there's going to be resistance. There's going to be different ways of doing it and perspectives. So I hope that we have left you with some insights and better understanding of how you can implement board evaluations, in your organization. Any other questions you have, please do. We're happy to follow up on that, so please do share that with us. In conclusion of this event, I would just like to take a moment to thank all of the role players who made this event possible. Special thanks to our facilitator, Dr. Demkowski. Your insights and your experiences help us to create these platforms where we can share the knowledge and our experiences, and also just to connect and learn from one another. It is important to drive change in boards, and that can only be done if we can share our knowledge on how that can be done. A very special thank you to Mohammed, Zakir, and the team at ICSB. It's been a pleasure to work with you again. Thank you for hosting today's event, and we look forward to doing the next events with you for the rest of the year. Thank you also to our CSIA Exco members for their contributions and support. And of course, a very big thank you to our audience members who joined us today. Thank you for your questions. It always makes the engagement so much more interactive and adds a lot of value and new perspective to our discussions. So yeah, once again, please, any questions, send me an email and we'll be happy to provide a response for you. On behalf of CSIA, Better Boards and ICSB, we wish everyone all the best. Have a wonderful day further and we'll see you next time.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. On
Bye.
behalf of
Goodbye,
ICSB,
everyone.
we also thank you all for organizing this event very successfully, and thank you once again.
Thank you all.
Yes.
Goodbye.